Well, Toronto fans, it's your turn. I've gone through all the teams that have been knocked out of the playoffs in the first round in alphabetical order up into Toronto. So, Toronto's an interesting case because Kyle Dubas makes it that way. Last year when they let Lou Lamoriello go and they're like, all right, we're going with this wonderkind here. We don't want to lose him to somebody else. I thought that's interesting. And of course, a lot of people say, Lou's done. He's finished. Lou's had his time. Good for Lou. Off you go. And then the Islanders did pretty darn well under Lou Lamoriello. Now Barry Trotz helped. And what's interesting with Toronto is now they're all in that Babcock's coming back. And do you know what's funny? With the way all of this is being phrased and with the way all of this is being presented to the public, I got a funny feeling that Kyle Dubas is going to try to stay true to his word that everybody's coming back. I think the belief is, and I get this sense from him, we have the parts we need. We're on the right track. Just keep at her. Skill, skill, and more skill, and we'll figure it out. And if we have to sacrifice a couple of guys to stay under the cap, we do that. But we're going to keep this core together. We're going to keep the coach. Everything's going to stay the same, which will leave Leafs fans saying, but Zach Hyman played how many minutes compared to the star of the franchise, Austin Matthews, in the biggest game of the year? Why was Hyman on the ice so often? Why was he on the first line? And these are questions that Leafs fans honestly have a right for an answer to. And to just hear, well, it's his turn. Well, we play this way. No. But while those answers will linger out there, the team lost 5 points off last year with a 46-28-8 record. Their goals for this year, they were number 4 in the NHL goals against. They were 18th. Last year, they were number 2 and number 11 in those respective categories. So they definitely, if it feels like they took a bit of a step back this year on some level, they did. And in round 1, they scored 17 goals and they allowed 25. Or 23, I should say. It was a rough exit. And if it was anybody but Boston, let's be honest, it would have felt just as bad. If, let's say Toronto ended up playing against the Islanders. Let's say the Toronto ended up playing against anybody else. And they still lose in the first round. It might have actually made Leaf fans feel worse. At this point, Toronto has the boogeyman that is the Boston Bruins. But if somebody else had been that opponent, if it had been the Islanders, if it had been Carolina, then that would have been 3 different teams that knocked him out in the first round in 3 consecutive seasons. I honestly think it would have felt worse. Because I think the optimism would have been there right off the hop for Toronto fans. Like, yeah, we avoided Boston, we're going to win now. And then if this team had lost in the first round, which is quite possible, there would have been a problem. Now, I want to discuss Mitch Marner a little bit because there are a lot of Leaf fans who, at the start of the year, said Marner should get $6-7 million a year. He had 69 points when they were saying that. He got 94 points this year, 26 goals, 68 assists, 94 points. And I still see people saying, he'll probably get 8. The difference between 69 points and 94 points is $1 million? I don't think so. If he's worth 6 or 7 at 69 points, he can get up to 10. And I know people say, well, he's a winger. Wingers don't get that kind of money. Right. Marner's special. Mitch Marner proved this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's special. And he is the guy that while we all talk about Tavares and Matthews, Marner's kind of the guy. Tavares did come in and have 47 goals and 41 assists this year. That's after last year he had 37 goals and 47 assists for the New York Islanders. Matthews played 68 games, 37 goals, 36 assists. That's after last year he played 62 games, 34 goals, 29 assists. The storyline with Matthews is, can he stay healthy? And yet, the extension he got is for a lot of money. It's a lot, considering he's been injured 34 games in the last 2 years. And I know, Leaf fans are going to say, well, he's worth it. There are a lot of Leaf fans are going to say he's worth it. But $11.5 million for Matthews, that definitely means Marner should be worth 10. We're not even saying that Marner should be worth the same as Matthews when we say 10. We're saying, hey, relative to Matthews, you've got to at least think he's, 80% as good as Matthews. So if he's worth 80% of a Matthews, he's worth about $10 million. Riley, 20 goals, 52 assists for 72 points. Last year he had 6 goals, 46 assists. There are definite signs here that the Leafs got better, but they also kind of got more top-heavy. Because remember, their goals for, they didn't move up. They actually dropped a couple of spots, so they're looking like a team that's got more of that star power, and then there's a lack of depth behind it. Kapanen, 20 goals and 24 assists. Last year he had 7 goals and 2 assists. Kadri had 16 goals, 28 assists. He's the one that's been clawed back. He had 32 goals and 23 assists last year. And I said when they brought in Tavares, I didn't understand it because I thought Kadri was a really good second-line center. That was the only part that I didn't get with the Tavares thing, was I thought Kadri was best suited as a second-line center, definitely as an agitator, and as much as I dislike him for things that he's done over the years, if he became available, I would be very upset with Don Sweeney if he didn't at least call and say, we think he might be a good Bruin. And again, I'm not saying that would happen. I'm just saying that a general manager, if he becomes available, should be on the phone making a call. Because Kadri's not paid an exorbitant amount of money for what he can do. For what he did this year, sure. Could he be thrown under the bus for the suspension against the Bruins? Sure. I don't think that was the difference maker in the series, but it definitely didn't help Toronto's case. Now, Anderson, 36, 16, and 7 this year, 2.77 goals against, 917 save percentage. Last year's numbers were actually better. 38, 21, and 5 with the 2.81 goals against, 918 save percentage. Now, was it the better backup? Is that what it was? Because Sparks this year, 8, 9, and 1 with a 3.15 goals against and a 902 save percentage. Last year's numbers for McElhinney show that for anybody who wants to say, well, we didn't know how good McElhinney was, you didn't watch last year, because he had a 15, 11, and 5 record with a 2.14 goals against and a 934 save percentage. That's not over a small sample size either. That's over 30-plus games. He had a save percentage of 934. He played out of his mind. Now, you can make the argument, well, he played against weaker opponents. So did Sparks. So, for Toronto right now, there's an interesting dilemma at hand because really they would have been better off if they'd kept McElhinney. And that's the truth. Even if Sparks had gone on waivers and ended up being claimed, I honestly think Toronto would have been better off with McElhinney. They could have rested Anderson more. McElhinney's numbers, I think, would have been not 934 good, but probably 920 to 925 good rather than the 902 they got from Sparks. Now, hindsight's 2020. But this is not a cost-cutting move to get Sparks. It was just Sparks is younger. And the idea being, and Kyle Dubas has this vision, that guys who've played for the Marlies are going to come up and play for the Leafs. We're going to improve from within. And that feels like what he wants to do this summer as well, because they have a cap problem. They're currently at $74.2 million out of an $83 million cap. I don't care if it's 23, 25 guys. The thing is, that's only 17 players that are calculated for that $74.2 million. So they definitely are going to have some issues this summer. Now, looking at contracts, and I just want to get into what they're paying some of these guys. Marleau, $6.25 million till 2020. Now, I've seen people saying, well, Marleau's contract's a problem. I said that 2 years ago when they signed him. But I had a lot of people saying, Marleau's necessary. They need that veteran voice in the locker room. Then he got 27 goals last year. And nobody was complaining about Marleau last year with those 27 goals. Now, this year, his goals totals drop. So, of course, he's the easy target. But he's getting older, and this is kind of what happens when a player gets older. The goal totals drop, and you become more of just a pure leader. 6.25, almost 6.5, really. $6.25 million? That's a lot. Nylander, $6.96 million till 2024. So 5 years at that. And I'm not saying anything out of line to say he didn't perform well this year, but there's a feeling that, well, he'll be fine next fall. And I don't have any reason to believe that Kyle Dubas has changed his mind on Nylander. I don't. I think with Nylander, I think he's learned I don't want to go through these contract holdouts into the middle of the year, which is part of the reason why he wants Marner dealt with before July 1st. But Nylander, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Now, maybe Dubas changes his mind and moves him, but he seems very set in his vision, which I admire, and I can understand why Leaf fans are frustrated with it at the same time. Kadri, of course, $4.5 million until 2022. Matthews at $11.6 million until 2024. it's a good contract length, but again, for a guy who gets injured like Matthews does, and then in Game 7 against Boston, it's not fair. It's not fair what I'm about to say, but in Game 7 against Boston, he wasn't trusted by his coach enough in the third period of a game they desperately needed to tie and win. He wasn't played enough. Now the coach has a green light to stay for next year, which is strange. Because as a manager, if I'm investing $11.5 million in a guy starting next season, and I can see my coach doesn't have a whole lot of faith in him late in the game, and we'll stick a guy on one leg out there instead, in Zach Hyman, I'm probably at least going to have some questions. But I guess Matthews can have a meeting with Babcock again this summer, I'm sure, about fishing. Because last year they had to have a meeting during the summer, and I'm sure that had nothing to do with any kind of a strain there. I can understand why Matthews would be frustrated, and I can also understand on some level Babcock's thinking, but there's something there. And we'll see what happens this summer, because again, with Matthews making that much, it is hard to argue against paying guys on this team similar amounts of money. You are bringing up the amount of money you have to pay everybody else. Now, Nikita Zaitsev, that $4.5 million till 2024, is number one on the hit list for fans. Fans want Zaitsev gone, and I understand why. Zaitsev, often a misadventure out there. Tavares at $11 million till 2025. You'll notice I have that one in black because it ain't going anywhere. They're not moving him. It's not going to happen. But that's $22.6 million between Tavares and Matthews. Now, if Marner makes $9 million, you're now paying $31.6 million to three players, and you haven't won a round yet. This is the problem. This is where the issue comes in. And even at $83 million cap, $31.6 million tied up in three players, that's a lot of money. Now, where their issue is their unrestricted free agents this summer are Jake Gardiner. He's not coming back. I can't see how they can make enough cap space for him, even if they get rid of Kadri, even if they somehow find a way to get rid of Marleau. Well, now you've got $11 million extra, but you have to bring in forwards to replace those guys. You can't keep bringing in guys from Europe and saying, here's the latest thing. And they've signed a couple of European players since getting knocked out of the playoffs. And I'm finally seeing some pushback from Leafs fans going, wait a minute, we've done this every summer. We need to do something right here to fix this. And these guys who come over from Europe, it's a great story and all, but they don't usually stick around and they're not usually part of the solution. Hainsey being a UFA is huge. And it is an understated, underrated item that Ron Hainsey's leaving this team. Ron Hainsey has had absolutely great chemistry on the Leafs. He fits into Mike Babcock's system absolutely perfectly, and I'm sure Babcock is not going to be happy if he leaves. Could Hainsey be talked into coming back on a one-year contract for maybe a decent discount off what he'd get on the free agent market? Maybe. Hainsey may not leave. Marincin, nobody's going to care if Marincin leaves. Tyler Ennis, you can replace what Ennis did. Ennis at points this year looked solid, but you can replace Tyler Ennis. It's when you get to the restricted free agents, you have a problem. Marner, it doesn't take a very big offer before Toronto has to scramble and mess with their salary cap in order to keep players. So it's not a matter just of offer sheeting Marner and then they go, here we go, we're gonna accept that, fine, yeah. We match it. If it's a $10 million offer, we match it. Done. And of course the $10 million Leaf fans go, wait a minute, what? Because then it's $32.6 million for three players. It is challenging. And it's something that Kyle Dubas wants to avoid, so he has to negotiate a contract with Marner before July 1st. Kapanen, I can't see a way to make the math work. I can't see a way to keep Kapanen around. And Johnsson, with arbitration rights, again, Johnsson had a very strong season. Kapanen had a strong season. I know he went through a long goal-scoring drought, but he still did get 20. He still got 44 points. He is still a very good player. And Ozhiganov, I put gone instead of arbitration rights because Ozhiganov apparently is already on his way back to the KHL. And I don't think there's going to be any Leaf fans that are overly upset to see him go. But it speaks to the lack of depth on the blue line. Now, Leaf fans will say, we've got Rasmus Sandin, we've got Timothy Liljegren, and they're right. But how ready are these guys? And I have a funny feeling that on some level, when Mike Babcock said we have a couple of guys coming, he may have meant them, because I can't see what he means. I don't see big guys on their way. Like, I don't see Wayne Simmons as a UFA this summer signing with the Leafs, because they can't sign him. And they don't have any big physical presence coming up in the minors. Jeremy Bracco may end up getting called up. He may end up getting a shot next year. Calle Rosen, I've been singing the praises of Calle Rosen anytime I've seen him play. I don't think Babcock has a whole lot of faith in him. I think there are Leaf fans that don't have a whole lot of faith in him either. We'll see whether or not he gets a shot next year. But Borgman and Rosen, when they were brought over, they were trumpeted as being, these guys could be great on the blue line, and it really hasn't worked out. So for Toronto, it has been a lot of stops and starts. I think the star players on this team are fantastic. I think the depth is where things are a problem. And I think with the way that the salary cap is working out for them right now, it could be more of a problem. If you have a general manager who's very emotionally invested in the players, if you have a general manager who cares passionately about the players, it can cause the team on the ice to be negatively impacted. Because he may say, you know what, you're great. When the guy sits down and goes, hey, I want $11.5 million, he goes, man, you're worth every penny of that. You are fantastic out there. There may be a lack of an objective attitude and an idea of, okay, you want that, but realistically, here's where we're at next year for the cap. If I give you that, and here's some comparable players that I have here for you, and really sit down and figure it out. And I don't know how much of that actually took place in the negotiations for contracts with Tavares and with Matthews, but we'll see what happens next year. Because I think the key thing coming out of this year is, and the reason I'm spending so much more time on this than on some of the other ones is, this is a team that was supposed to be into contender status. They're supposed to still be playing hockey right now. They were supposed to be at least second round this season, and they weren't. And there's a lot of question marks as to what they're going to do. And it feels to me like Kyle Dubas wants to just, steady as she goes, we're going to keep going in that same direction. And fans, they want to go in another direction. The coach himself may be looking at the roster and saying, geez, I could use some more physical guys out here. We could use an Adam McQuaid in the offseason. We could use some physicality on this team. But we'll see what happens, right? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.